What is the price that you are willing to pay for beauty? What's up, guys? I'm Shannon, founder of Your Hair Made Simple, a podcast where we help you to embrace your natural hair with clarity, confidence, and courage. And today we are diving into some investigative journalism recaps. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution recently put out an article entitled, "Her Hair Was Perfectly Straight, Her Body Paid the Price." And man, guys, it is really getting into the details of women in the state of Georgia, specifically for this article. There are about over 600 plaintiffs, so individuals who are suing companies because of the impacts of perms to their hair and their bodies over time, right? And so we're going to dive into this article. If you have heard of it, then let me know your thoughts in the comments. But if you haven't, we're going to go through just some of what these women are explaining that they are experiencing after decades and years of getting perms, and the journeys that they're having to go through now to litigate and try to seek justice in a system that really is giving them a lot of pushback, right? And so I know that we all probably know someone who's gotten perms. My mom had perms for years and years and years until she had an illness that caused her to have to stop. She had thyroidism and it was going to impact her health, so she had to stop. Who have had perms within the Black community, and perms are specifically targeted towards the Black and Hispanic communities. So this is not a topic that is far away from our homes. Some of the members are in DeKalb County, which is my home county where I grew up and where I'm from. And so we're going to get into the article, guys, because one, there's a lot just to be aware of in terms of our own health, but there's also just so much in terms of like what we can be doing and how we can be mindful, right? And just asking ourselves the question, what price am I willing to pay for beauty? What price am I willing to pay for convenience? What price am I willing to pay for comfort with my hair? And so there's a couple of different women that the article profiles. And it really starts off, one, saying that Georgia is like the state with the second highest amount of litigations for people who are suing hair companies because of perms. Some of the companies that are included are like Bronner Brothers, Just For Me, African Pride, like brands that you probably know the names of, brands that you're probably familiar with because of their perm products over the years. The state, Georgia, has about 600 different plaintiffs. So Georgia is the second state next to Illinois. Illinois has over 10,000, around 10,000 individuals right now, plaintiffs who are suing because of, in relation to perms, that are going to federal court. There are women who are in these documents in their 80s. There are women who are significantly older who have lived their whole lives getting perms in their 50s, older, and are now like part of these lawsuits because they are experiencing cancer. They're experiencing all of these different things. So let's get into it. The article starts off and it profiles Joanna Zachary, right? And I think Zachary, she starts off as 21 and her story is so familiar. So she talks about when she was 21 and how she would see people on TV. She would see them with beautiful bone straight hair. And really all of this desire stems from wanting to be seen as beautiful. And so how many of us want to feel beautiful? We want to feel seen. We want to feel appreciated. And so Zachary shares that getting perms for her at the time was the thing that, helped her to do that. And she got perms for over 30 years. And then suddenly she finds herself dealing with a cancer diagnosis. And so just adding some context to this, the National Institutes of Health in 2022 put out a study that found that women who use hair straightener treatments, including perms, were twice as likely to get uterine cancer. Uterine cancer significantly impacts Black women at a higher rate than it does other races and ethnicities of women. So we're already battling these different hair things and health issues, right? And then we're using chemicals and things that help to exacerbate cancer, help to exacerbate the risks at which we're putting ourselves. And so Zachary goes on to really just talk about, having this experience of this being her routine, this being her everyday norm, and suddenly finding herself sick, finding herself ill, right? And the article goes on to say that earlier on, perms were used with lye. They were used with these chemicals that we consider to be harmful. Then they changed them to no lye perms, which were thought to be not as bad in terms of like the damage that they would do to our hair. But over time, they stopped studying them. They stopped testing perms. They made them and then they really stopped kind of monitoring them to see the impact over time. And so now we're seeing that maybe health conditions or things that were not like previous related are tracked. The NIH did this study and other studies and correlations have found that they're actually not healthy and helpful for us, which I think is so interesting because a lot of the company names, like if you would read them, right, like some of the companies that are included, Soft and Beautiful, African Pride, Just For Me, Strength of Nature is like one of the parent companies of all of them. And I think this is partially due to like research and just learning and understanding over time. But a lot of the names lend us to thinking that they're healthy, to thinking that they would be safe, to thinking that they would be something that, we could place our trust in as consumers, right? Over time. So Joanna is one of the women, but the woman that really got me in this story, there's a woman and she talks about being in her 30s. She was about 34 years old, Annie Ruth Williams. And she says like she grew up getting perms, seeing her family get perms in the kitchen, and she considered it a luxury. Doing your hair is a communal experience. And so she talks about how they would bond around coming home on Sundays. It's the day to do your hair. It's the day to get your perm. It's the day to like cook dinner together and all these other things. And she even saw her mom go on to be over 105 years old. And so she saw other people in her life going on, being healthy. She didn't think that anything had happened to her. And now she's in her 80s, guys. She is in her 80s. And she found herself experiencing bleeding, knowing that it was no longer her menstrual cycle. So she goes to the doctor and finds out that she is experiencing uterine cancer. And this one just kind of hit home to me because I know so many of like my friends, my peers, I'm having conversations with them now. Like when we talk about our natural hair, we talk about sometimes just how it's not always convenient. It's not always easy. But I think about what are we willing to trade off with our current self for our future self, right? Especially because we have the knowledge and we know now that these articles are coming out. So I have friends who they're like, yeah, I've seen so-and-so get perms their whole life and they turned out okay, or they're in their 60s and they're okay. This woman is in her 80s. She lived past her 60s. She lived past the point that we think people are okay and then found herself with cancer later on in life. It just really, really touched me. I'm like, imagine living your whole life thinking you're okay to learn that something that's been a source of enjoyment in some ways has really been secretly making you, and you didn't know anything about it to do anything differently. And the people around you didn't know anything about it to do anything differently. And so taking a step back from all of this, right? Like just thinking about what perms actually are and what they're doing. So perms are chemical treatments, right? Like they're chemical treatments. They have the base, the activator, and then the part that kind of like calms everything down. And they're used to break down your hair strands. So they're used to essentially change the structure of your hair. If your hair is naturally curly, it's used to, the chemicals make your hair straight. So that way your curls do not return, they don't revert, right? And so the chemicals within that, they're in our scalp, they're absorbed into our body, they're absorbed into all these other places. And over time, right, lots of people get perms every 4 to 6 weeks. So imagine doing that from your 20s to your 50s, or from your 30s to your 80s, right? Over 50 years, over 30 years. What are you willing to compound? Like how much sickness are you willing to compound is a question that these women didn't get the chance to ask themselves. But as these articles come out and as this information comes out, we have the opportunity and the chance to ask ourselves, not out of fear, but more so out of learning, right? Learning from our elders, learning from the information that's available, which is why I think this is such an important topic to watch. So right now, these guys, these women, these ladies are currently fighting for their health, fighting for their rights. They are fighting to be compensated. And particularly for the women in Georgia, their case is really interesting because they're experiencing these health issues. And now research has come out to say that these chemical straighteners are likely to be enabling them to be experiencing uterine cancer as well as ovarian cancer. So women are coming out saying that they are having hysterectomies. They're having their whole reproductive organs removed. In the article, one of the women states that she had a son, but then ultimately she ended up having to have her reproductive organs removed and did not get the chance to have a daughter. So the price that she ultimately paid was missing out on the chance to have a daughter. And she didn't know she was paying that price, right? So for these women, they're now trying to battle these things out in court. In the state of Georgia, they have a law where pretty much companies are only held liable for a product from the first time you use the product for a span of 10 years after that, right? And so I know my cousins, I think about my family members that started getting perms in elementary school. 10 years later, they're teenagers, right? So the statute of limitations on their ability to receive compensation has passed well before people could even be aware. And that's what these women are currently facing and encountering as they're going into these lawsuits. But the volume of it is something that's so interesting to watch because we'll see how these things play out. They're slated to go to trial and to be in courts, some of them as early as the top of 2026. So this is an ongoing narrative that we'll be monitoring for what individuals with curly hair in general who have experienced perms, how are companies going to respond to the other side of it, right? The chemicals and the impacts and the things that have really built up over the years. So these women are really being trailblazers for hair health, right? They're being trailblazers for saying like, hey, this is what's happening to me, and opening the door for information and access. But not only that, by sharing their stories, like they're opening pathway for recompense and reconciliation in terms of what companies are going to do. But the other thing that was really interesting about the article, it not only talked about the women, right? It talked about their journeys with cancer. It talked about their journeys with the legislation issues surrounding this, right? Like with it being 10 years. The other thing it talked about is like, in addition to the perms themselves, the chemicals that can be found in certain hair products. And so the secret ingredients that are underlying that aren't heavily regulated by the hair care industry that can be sneaking into our products, even outside of perms. So one of these chemicals that they talked about in our hair care products is this term phthalates. And I'm always like, phthalates. It's such a weird word. But essentially, phthalates are an ingredient that's added to fragrances. To like, if you see the ingredient fragrance on any hair products, the term fragrance is not a regulated term. So it could be masking hundreds of different chemicals underneath that one label. But phthalates are essentially an ingredient that helps to make the fragrance last longer. So they want your products to smell good. So they use these things to make your products smell good and to last longer. But it has a similar function, per the article, to estrogen. So like ultimately this ingredient that people are seeing, they're saying it's like linked to developing fibroids or hormone sensitive cancers, and illnesses that harm our reproductive systems, right? And so we're thinking, oh, I just want this product because it smells good. It's going to be nice. Like it's a nice scent. Maybe it's my favorite scent. I know I love the scent lavender. I don't know what your favorite scent is, but lavender's top tier in mine, right? But ultimately this ingredient, while it's helping scents to last longer, is enabling illness, right? Like by operating similar to estrogen and like over estrogen within our bodies. And so even outside of the perms, it really gives pause to think about, what are the things that are in my products? Like, do you know what's in your products? Do you know the ingredients? Have you turned over the back of a label to take a look and take a pause and say like, hey, do I actually understand what's in the ingredients that I'm using right now? And if not, like that is okay, right? Because we're sharing information because today is an amazing and great day to start to learn, to start to do something new. It's never too late. And one of the resources that I love is the Environmental Working Group Skin Deep database. So you can type that on into Google right now while you're listening to me and pull it up. But essentially it has different products. So you could search a whole product in there, or you could search specific ingredients, and it tells you what the risks are of certain ingredients. Like if they are known to have endocrine disruptors, if they're possibly linked to cancer causing agents, right? And so really starting to build our knowledge base, to build our understanding on what's in our products, and identifying safer options if we find that something maybe it hasn't been the best for us over time. In the podcast, I interviewed Dr. Amika Coleman, who has Aligned Strands of Faith, and we did a conversation on how do people think about formulating products? Like, what are some of the best ingredients that you can be on the lookout for, right? I know there are certain things like that I try to lean towards, especially because I have sensitive skin, sensitive scalp, and allergens. That's why at Your Hair Made Simple, we have our nourishing hair butter and oil. But even outside of that, like I am always leaning towards products with sensitive skin. I'm trying my best to avoid the fragrances and the phthalates, and doing that research and doing that work, right? And so for you, just starting with the product audit, like what's currently in your hair pantry, what's currently hanging out underneath your bathroom sink that maybe is or is not serving you. Sometimes even if products are giving us like good results, like maybe over time, right? Like these ladies thought their hair was beautiful. They thought their hair was straight. It was doing what they wanted to be done. But at the end of the day, underneath the surface, it was also still enabling some sickness and some illness there, right? And so I think these women are being brave and giving us room and opportunity to learn from their stories by sharing the experiences that they are going through. And so as these women are navigating their journeys, as they are navigating their health, right? And having to fight the legal fees, the medical fees, probably some of the mental weight too, and their family of navigating these health issues. I just go back to that question, like, what is the price that we're willing to pay for beauty? This is the price these women are paying that they didn't know they were opting into. And a lot of times, I know some people are skeptical, and it's like, how do we land in this place? Like, how do we land in this place where perms did become the norm, where perms were the standard of beauty, where people weren't questioning more? But I think the article also highlights really just talking about safety when it comes to how we are going to be perceived in the world, how we are going to show up, right? How we're going to be judged based on how our hair looks. One of the judges in DeKalb County who was working on these cases said that as she was, dealing with these women, she was feeling the feels and feeling the emotions, because these are also products, some of which she has used herself. And so she's watching these women share their stories, also having to process her own experience. And also, I believe this was the same judge or one of the different judges, but talked about pretty much how, as a judge, she was really worried about how she was going to be perceived in her workspace, right? Like, if people were going to trust her decisions as valid because her hair was too big or too wild or too messy or too in the way that day. And so even now, like, she straightened her hair, like had the perms, did all the things for a long time. And so she saw another Black woman judge that had braids. So now every so often she wears braids in the courtroom. And it took her seeing somebody else to be able to unlock that for her to say, like, hey, like, I don't always have to show up with straight hair in this space. And that's just perception of how it can impact our work, right? Which I know so many of us have to think about, like, how am I going to be perceived based on how I wear my hair or how I show up? For this judge, she's been able to wear braids and see that she's able to continue to do her work. But another thing that is so interesting that they highlighted is the work of the Crown Act. The Crown Act has made it so that certain states cannot discriminate against you based on the state of your natural hair, right? I know a couple of years ago, there were all these different things in the news, and there probably still are many stories, but there was always one that stuck out to me about this, like, wrestler, and he was in high school and he had locks and he was going to the mat to get ready to wrestle. They stopped the whole thing, made him cut his hair like in real time so he could go wrestle. And I'm pretty sure the mom was like not happy. She was very upset with it, but of course, because your locks don't impact your ability to wrestle. But stories like that, time and time again, where people's perception of what like our hair care is has led to these actual like physical violations, right? And so every state does not have something like the Crown Act. Georgia is one of the states that has not passed or legislated for the Crown Act. And so really adding to the vulnerability and the risk. And I'm not saying this to say that like we should be fearful and not wear natural hair or not like embrace it. I'm saying this to say that these are the real weights and things that people are dealing with, that people are navigating, that people are wrestling with, right? The mental load, the health concerns, the trade-offs of, am I willing to operate in this space of comfort today for potential sickness and discomfort tomorrow? When does tomorrow come? We really don't know. So we're risking it sneaking up on us. But what are the exchanges that we're willing to make? What are the exchanges that you're willing to make? Or if it's not an exchange, what is the boldness that you're willing to walk in, right? To make a choice, to try and learn something new, to try and learn to care for your hair, to wrestle on the days where you're feeling overwhelmed or feeling tired with your hair, or to give yourself grace in exchange for lessening the risk of health issues, lessening the risk of illness in old age or even in current age, right? We have a woman who's 50. We have a woman who's 80. Those things in life, time goes by, time is fleeting. Things are not as far off as we make them to seem. And so this article is so important. My heart feels for the women. I'm grateful for them sharing their stories. And we are in a position, if you're listening and you are one of the women, I just empower you and encourage you. And I say thank you for sharing your journey and being a charger and a trailblazer in justice in this cause. If you're not one of the individuals and you're sitting and really trying to figure out what to do with your hair, how to care for your hair, you're hearing these stories, you're hearing these journeys, right? Then really just sitting with yourself and envisioning the future that you want to have, right? And thinking about what are some of the small changes? What are some of the things that you can do right now in today's current day and age to set yourself up for healthier options, knowing now that we are seeing more and more women come out, right? 600 plaintiffs in Georgia, 10,000 in Illinois, and who knows where else this case is going to go, right? Like 2026 is when they're coming to legislate. So we will see, and I will be monitoring and watching this, but we don't know like what all else is to come. As I said, there's a research gap in terms of perms, in terms of these ingredients. So how is this going to progress and play out moving forward? And I think it's especially important that we reflect, because one of the things that the women shared, right, when she talked about seeing the other judge with the braids, the judge wearing the braids unlocked for her the ability to say, like, I'm going to make some different hair choices and not always straighten my hair, not always do these things. So as we reflect, recognizing that us showing up in our authenticity and trying to learn creates space for community. It creates space for other people to feel empowered to maybe make a different choice, even if we don't feel the best or the boldest in our own choices, right? But who knows? The judge could have just been trying to like have a better hair day and keep her hands out of her hair for a month. But in her wearing her braids, somebody else was like, hey, like maybe I don't have to damage my hair so much. I can just put braids in, which comes with its own set of maintenance and hair care, right? There's braids brands like Rebundle Co. that is made from banana fiber. It's organic and it's biodegradable, and it's made to not have some of those same like hard plastics and chemicals that are found in some of the more common and standards of braiding hair. I think there's Doso Beauty. I believe they like pre-treat it so it doesn't have the chemicals on it. Some people use acrylic yarn. There's all different types of innovative ways, right? And so how can we think a little bit more outside of the box to allow ourselves a better chance at health, but also shine a light and be representation to others? And so as you reflect, think about what hair care choices have you been making, or maybe you've prioritized aesthetics over really thinking about hair care choices or thinking about it in the terms of wellness, right? Like, I'd love to hear in the comments on this episode, share if you have any thoughts, or you can send a DM or an email to admin@YourHairMadeSimple and share like maybe some of your own natural hair stories and how thinking about this article or hearing the stories about these women, and I'm going to link it into the description box below, but how like hearing about their stories is maybe making you reflect on things that you can do in your natural hair journey differently. But I really want you to pause and think on that, reflect on it, and maybe think about like what is something that you've always wanted to do for your natural hair, like for your own health, or for your own just exploration, right? That you can find some room to incorporate into your space, find some room to explore a safer alternative, or even just find time, right, to assess your products and start with base one to go forward in healthier hair. So that is a recap, guys, of what is currently unfolding in the state of Georgia in regards to individuals who are currently suing companies for damages that perms have caused, that they are saying have caused to their bodies over time, from uterine cancer to ovarian cancer to removals of reproductive organs, and how these women are currently mounting up for battle. They're mounting up for the legal system, and we'll continue to follow this. But as you reflect on your own natural hair journeys, thinking about what are some small changes that you can make for your health? What is the price that you are willing to pay in terms of the aesthetics versus your hair health choices? And what is a starting point that you can do right now to best set yourself up for health in the future? So that's what I'm going to leave you with. If you have a hair story that you want to share, if you have thoughts that you want to share about the article, about the women and their journeys, about this episode, right? Then feel free to leave a comment below. Feel free to follow Your Hair Made Simple on Instagram and TikTok @Your Hair Made Simple. You can subscribe to our newsletter at the link in bio below. But send over your hair stories. Send over your thoughts. Let me know. I would love to hear what this article sparked for you all, right? As we continue to follow these journeys and support these women by sharing the stories, so that way that the work that they're doing to find justice is not lost into the vacuum. So thanks so much for joining this investigative journalism recap episode of Your Hair Made Simple. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next week for our next episode. Thanks for hanging out until the end. And until next time, remember that all hair is good hair and your hair is good hair. All right, guys, have a good one. Bye.